Welcome in to the newest episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. We're glad to have you here joining us for this one. We are going to have a blast today talking about the fifth episode of Ahsoka that we watched last night at the time of this recording. And I think it's fair to say we were all pretty blown away for that. Before we get into any of the discussion, be sure if you're not already subscribed to the Hoth Hangout podcast over on YouTube, to hit the subscribe button over there. We also want to say a huge thank you to all the recent subscribers, especially over on YouTube. Since our last podcast episode, we have over 75 new subscribers, 75 new folks here, hopefully listening to this podcast. So we want to
I
wish you all a special welcome. Yes, hello, hello. And thank you, most of all. Thank you for being subscribed to our YouTube channel. And additionally, I might add the reaction that we posted yesterday. We're super thankful for all the love and support on that as well. One of the most watched and successful videos we've had. So appreciate you all for that as well. Again, you can catch the audio version of the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. And check us out on the socials at Instagram, TikTok, and X at Hoth Hangout on each of those. You can also always email us at hothangout@gmail.com. Any questions or thoughts you have about Star Wars or just anything otherwise, we would very much appreciate that as well. And we do want to say, again, a special welcome if you managed to catch yesterday's reaction, which was uploaded to the YouTube channel. You know that Alex was here with us and joined us for the episode 5 reaction. We're so grateful to have Alex with us today as well to break down the fifth episode and hang out with us. What's going on, Alex? How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me again. Last night was awesome, and I'm glad to be back and recap everything. And I'm just so excited. I've really been enjoying Ahsoka and getting to watch it, and getting to watch it with you guys was even better. So it's just honestly been a blast, and I cannot wait to see where this goes with this series. So yeah.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Again, if anyone hasn't watched both Joey and Alex and I's reaction to last night's episode, it was a pretty fun one. So
It
um,
was.
catch that if you haven't yet. And then Joey, how are you doing, dude? I know you're feeling a little under the weather the past few
right.
days.
Yeah, so I found out yesterday I got the COVID, so I am on under quarantine in this office slash stream room slash game room. I don't know if you can tell there's a bed back here for those that are watching the video version of the podcast.
He was just gonna go camping after
Yeah,
the
after
episode.
after we hit the stop recording, I'm just gonna jump over to bed and get to sleep. But I am feeling a lot better. Last night after we did the reaction, I was pretty zonked out. So, but I got a lot of good sleep last night, or today actually. So I'm here to talk a little bit of Star Wars with y'all first, and let's have a good time talking about Ahsoka episode 5.
Amen.
Awesome, yeah. Real briefly, I also wanted to ask you, Alex, what were your just very overall thoughts on not just episode 5 really, but Ahsoka as a whole so far?
I have really loved it. I think it helped. I did watch some of the essential episodes that Disney put out. I thought that was really helpful, just kind of giving a refresh. And I think they've done a really great job of kind of blending a little bit of, if you've not really been paying attention to Clone Wars or Rebels, and for those of you who have. So I feel like they've done a good mix of being able to incorporate some of those things, those little Easter eggs that really give fan service. And it's just been a really enjoyable experience overall. And it just, I'm excited. I'm hopeful for a season 2.
Mm.
I want to put that out there. Like, I'm actually
Yeah.
very excited to see where this goes, and hopefully kind of the same a la, Mandalorian, hopefully.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
I mean, I think this even has the chance to be perhaps even more successful than The
I
Mandalorian.
think so. I think you're right.
Well, and yeah, and to note what you said as well about, incorporating the Rebels stuff, I think there were several times where the 3 of us were watching last night, and they said something, and we're like, "Oh, that was kind of a rep for the Rebels folks." Yeah.
Right.
So you're definitely right in that regard,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Before we move on to just a short bit of news, we also do wanna remind people that, this is Alex's actually well, including the reaction yesterday, technically the 3rd time joining us, as a part
Yes.
of Hoth Hangout, and, for anyone listening, if you haven't managed to catch Alex's first appearance on the Hoth Hangout channel, Alex was on episode 39 of the Hoth Hangout podcast.
Mhm.
And that video will also be linked down in the show notes below if you're watching on YouTube, and you'd like to check that out. We would definitely recommend that as well. That was the week where I was MIA, and so Alex stepped in and was awesome on that episode. And so definitely give that one a listen after you're finished with this one today, and you'll enjoy it as well.
Definitely.
Well, the first bit of news we have before we hop into some Ahsoka Episode 5 talk is related to another Star Wars show, actually. This one, however, is Skeleton Crew. We got some unfortunate news. I think it may have been the Bespin Bulletin um, that debuted this news or that broke this news regarding the release date of Skeleton Crew. It has been delayed, unfortunately. The original release date for this was, I want to say November of this year,
Mhm.
2023. And now reports are stating that it could potentially be as late as November of 2024.
Mm.
Um, and this is one that actually we were talking just right before we started recording that I admittedly don't know a ton about, and I, I was on the wiki reading it, and so there's this really short synopsis that's basically just that the series follows four kids who end up on an adventure to make their way home after being lost in the galaxy following a discovery they make on their home planet. Do either of you have any like more thoughts on the Skeleton Crew? Because I honestly am a little bit, ignorant when it comes to the specifics of what this show might be about, other than that brief sort of synopsis that I just read there.
I
I
think
was
with
in the
the
same Oh, go ahead, Joey.
oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I didn't know much about it outside of that as well. I
Mhm.
mean, I remember it coming out during the celebration, and there was I think the cast came up on stage and all that. But outside of that, I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. And I didn't even know it was actually coming out in November this year either. So that was a little bit of a shock.
Yeah, same for me. I remember seeing that in the notes. I remember that name, the title of the show, but it was very vague, and I also had to go look it up and see what was this about, so I can understand a little bit more about it. So yeah.
Yeah, all I really knew was I knew Jude Law was in it, and he's one of my favorite actors, and so I was like, "Ah, I'll watch it," you know? And of course, it's Star
Mhm.
Wars, so I'm gonna watch it no matter
Right.
what, but,
Of course.
um, however, we have to wait to watch it nonetheless, as it will be pushed back, likely a whole 'nother year potentially from its original release date, so look for this to come out sometime toward the end of 2024 now, more than likely, and if any of you listening out there have any thoughts on Skeleton Crew, let us know as well down in the comments of the YouTube video or tweet at us on the socials. Second piece of news, and this is, I think, one that most excites me of everything we'll be kind of talking about in terms of news today. There is a book written by John Jackson Miller called The Living Force. This book will come out at the time of this recording, September 13th, 2023. We're roughly about 7, 8 months away from the release of this book on April 9th of 2024. But basically, the concept for this book is that it takes place a year prior to the events of Phantom Menace, Episode 1. And it's kind of an in depth look into the members of the Jedi Council at this point in time, which for me, again, I love this era. This is one of my favorite eras of Star Wars. And I'm super pumped to hopefully get to read this in just a short 8 months' time. Anything in particular regarding this novel that excites you, Alex?
I think what you said about, learning more about the Jedi Council, the era of episodes 1, 2, and 3 has always been my favorite.
Really? I
And
didn't know that.
yes, those are my favorite.
Yes, Team Prickles.
Episode 3 is just
I'm going to
I could
bed.
put that on loop and watch
Joey's
it all
going to bed early.
day. Um, so I'm very excited. I have yet to read much of the Star Wars books. I'm hoping to get into those slowly. So I'm very excited as this is coming out. I feel like I love learning a lot about that kind of era, and as we're seeing even a little bit in the shows that come out, that there was a lot of, not necessarily friction, but how they kind of came about. Obviously they're trying to be impartial to a lot of things that are going on in the with the Senate and things like that. And so it'd be interesting to see how that all kind of ties in. And I love any type of Jedi Council lore because It's just awesome.
Yeah, me too. Joey, did you notice anyone in particular on this? For those of you watching the video version of the podcast, the cover art for the novel is being shown on screen, and
Mm.
there's a few different Jedi on the council in there. Any stand out in particular to you? I know you're a big Deepa Balaba fan.
I mean, Diva Balaba, I'm really interested in learning about. We got a lot of Plo Koon in the Clone Wars
Mhm.
animated series, so more Plo Koon I would be excited for. But that's Yaddle, right? Is that who we're seeing there
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
right? So
Which we got to see in Tales of the
we
Jedi a
got to
little
see it in
bit.
Tales of the Jedi, but I want to see even more Jedi Council. So this is what I like about the books. These types of characters may not be able to carry their own shows necessarily,
Right.
but to have, either their short stories or something about them written, comic books or what have you, it's always cool to learn more about characters like this that were important. Obviously, they're the Jedi Council, very important to the story, but they just didn't have enough gusto to have warrant a full on movie or show. So I'm definitely excited to read this one next. What do we say? April?
April 9th,
April 9th,
2024.
yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of these characters just operate so much on the periphery of like what we know as Star Wars that when we actually get to learn more about their backstory and their lore, it's like really just it provides a lot of depth to the world, which is pretty
Mhm.
cool in my opinion.
Yeah.
Especially my guy Yoda, he was my favorite character. I mean, he still is one of my favorites, but he was my favorite Star Wars character for so long. So
And it should be mentioned that that author John Jackson Miller, right?
yes,
He also wrote another book. That was the one with Hera and Kanan. What was it called?
oh,
It was A New Dawn. A
A
New
New
Dawn. He
Dawn.
wrote
Yep,
that too.
Okay.
Yeah,
yeah.
he did write that book too. So definitely a favorite of a lot of Star Wars readers too. So this is gonna be a good one.
That's interesting. There's so many great Star Wars writers, and most of them are very talented to the point where they don't even focus on an era. Like that is, during obviously like between 3 and 4, between Revenge of the Sith and New Hope, and then he's like doing something completely different
Hmm.
from that and going back to before the prequels. So,
Right.
um, speaks to his talent as an author, I would say. But yeah, be on the lookout for that coming out on April 9th, 2024. Um, and then lastly, we wanted to mention briefly again, and again, this is our last point of news before we start talking about the 5th episode of Ahsoka, is that Joey and I were recent guests on the Star Wars Hangout podcast. Yes, that is a different podcast than the Hoth Hangout podcast, hosted by Ezra. His YouTube channel, you can find him both at Star Wars Hangout as well as I think it's Master Badger 77.
Yeah.
But we'll have the link to the specific episode that we were on down in the show notes as well. If you're interested in checking that out, it was basically not only were we talking about the 4th episode of Ahsoka with Ezra, which by the way, yeah, his name is Ezra, so that's pretty cool. Um, but we were also kind of just talking about Joey and I giving a little insight into our history as Star Wars fans as well. So again, that will be down in the show notes if you're interested in watching that. Okay, that's all the news we have for today. So I feel like it's about time to hop into the 5th episode of Ahsoka. Before we talk about the specifics of it, I think it's worth talking just in terms of a general overview of the episode. Um, I have something I want to share. It was actually a comment from our reaction video that we posted on Wednesday morning. And maybe I can share this after we hear from both, or I'll go ahead and share it now, actually, just while we're here. Uh, the comment was from a user on YouTube, and I want to make sure I get credit to the commenter. This is from Slip6 Hazard. And so Slip6 Hazard on YouTube says, part of what I really love about Ahsoka this episode is her learning to see Anakin as her master again, and not just as the man he has become, Vader. Getting rid of that guilt she felt for not being there for him and realizing the good that was once in him is still within her. It really reminded me of the Luke versus Vader fight. Despite everything Vader has done, Luke still could see the light good in his father, and I think Ahsoka needed to learn that as well. I've seen some complain, and he writes like a little like rolling the eyes emoji face about this being just member berries and didn't propel the plot. But for me personally, it was just a great character episode for Ahsoka, especially if you've seen Clone Wars and everything she went through with Anakin. 100 out of 10 episode, and visually probably the best live action Star Wars to date. I would actually probably I wanna agree with this comment in almost every regard. I especially the very end, like, I loved the episode visually, and again, we'll talk more about that later, but so I wanted to share that because I thought it was a very insightful and well-written comment, and, we appreciate, again, when people leave those sort of comments on the channel. It makes us as Star Wars fans think a little bit deeper about what we watch as well. So let me get into the episode now, the overview. Joey or Alex, whoever wants to go first, just what did you think about the episode? I guess first, what were your overall thoughts after finishing it? We had our brief thoughts at the end of the reaction, but now that you've had, like, a 24-hour period to sort of mentally digest it, how are you feeling about it now? I guess we'll start with Alex, yeah.
Um, I actually rewatched it today, this morning, and I feel like watching it again, it got even better. And listening to that comment or listening to you read that comment, I completely 100% agree. And I think I had upped my ranking to like a 9.5 out of 10 just because I feel like it honestly visually was so wonderful, but I think I brought this up in the reaction video, but it kind of made you feel emotional because you felt like you were really going on this journey with um a master and a Padawan, in that relationship. And it's been talked about a lot in other Star Wars episodes, but I felt like this one has, especially if you watched Clone Wars and Rebels, you had really gone on this journey with them and it kind of wasn't finished, right? There were things left unsaid. And I felt like that's kind of what we got to see, where if you've ever been in that type of situation with someone or like a relationship or a friendship where it's like you kind of got closure. I kind of felt like she was able to, get some sort of closure on things that were left unsaid. And I just felt like it was a really great emotional, like almost like gut punching episode where I'm like, oh, yeah, I feel that. Like, I feel everything that even when they didn't say anything during their fight, I felt like everything was being said.
Yeah. Joey, what about you?
Yeah, I also watched it as well, and just seeing and I mentioned this last episode that you could tell there's a difference in Ahsoka when she noticed it was Anakin at the end of the last episode. Even that little bit, the way she said master, the way she said Anakin, it was just a little bit different than the stronger force that, we've come to see in the first few episodes of this series. And for her to be a little bit more vulnerable but they still have their banter going back and forth, where she says you look the same, he says you look old, so just like things like that, it just hit home with all the Clone Wars episodes that we've watched. And so we know the history that we have, and I think they did a really good job at the casting of young Ahsoka. I think they did a really good job of,
So good.
they did a really good job of making us feel like these aren't separate characters, if that makes sense. These are the same. This is the same person that we've come to know. Rosario Dawson's Ahsoka,
Yeah.
Ashley Eckstein's Ahsoka, and now this little girl's Ahsoka. It's all the same person. So I just really enjoyed that. And yeah, I was watching again, same thing, Alex. It was kind of a gut punch just seeing that and really taking it in. I think last night when we were watching it, there was just so much going on that I might not have been able to completely process everything. And we even mentioned as such last night, where I think we're going to need another watch to really soak it all in. And then we have comments like that on the YouTube channel to give us a little bit more insight, a little bit different perspective that makes it even better to watch.
Oh, yeah, I also wanna highlight the young Ahsoka thing that you mentioned. Ariana Greenblatt, the name of the actor. Greenblatt. Not sure exactly
Mhm.
how to pronounce her name, but, she has been in several huge, blockbuster movies now. She most recently was in Barbie. She was
Hmm.
the daughter in the Barbie movie. And then prior to that, she was young Gamora in the Marvel franchise for
Yeah.
Guardians of the
Yeah.
Galaxy. Busy actress and well deserved and well earned. I mean, she didn't miss a beat with young Ahsoka. I thought,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
you said, that was
Oh, yeah.
perfect casting. That was pretty great. But um, I think in regards to this episode, I am so on the fence. One of the things I was thinking about, I'm on the fence with which episode I liked more between episode 4 and 5, because they're definitely my 2 favorite of the season so far. But I wanna say episode 5, but I think that's mostly for the nostalgic effect of it.
Hmm.
Like, there was so much just Clone Wars stuff in there that I couldn't help but smile through that. But I can totally understand someone on the outside who has never seen Clone Wars or Rebels for that matter, watching this show and thinking, "Oh, episode 4 is definitely the best because that's when we saw the Anakin reveal."
Hmm.
Which to be fair is another reason maybe you would like episode 4 more than 5 is that there is this, like, massive, like, holy cow moment in episode 4. There is definitely some cool moments in episode 5. There's not that same, like, "This is Anakin" reveal like there
Hmm.
was in the previous episode, but all that to say, I personally think I liked episode 5 slightly more than 4, but I think it would not be I think it'd be fair to say that the general consensus amongst people who might have not seen the animated series might like episode 4 more? I don't know if that's the same vibe that you got or not.
I could see how that could be, but even when we were watching it, we were like you said, we were calling out like, "Oh, that's for the people who may not have seen," so not having that kind of in our we have that in our back pocket, so we're thinking like, "Oh, this is," we know exactly where that's from even before she said Siege of Mandalore. I think you may have said it already, or just
Mhm.
things like that. So just that enjoyment level is just going to be a little bit higher. Not better. I'm not going to say better. I think it's just, I think we will enjoy it, tad bit more because we're eating good right now. This is the kind of things that we're happy to see.
Yeah, like we always say, it's a great time to be a Star Wars fan.
Right.
Um, so just to kinda walk ourselves through the episode and we'll stop and we'll touch on certain topics more than others. Mainly, we're gonna be talking probably a fair amount about the world between worlds, and I could also see to the point we just mentioned, this is probably something that's the most confusing to someone who didn't see Rebels. Uh,
Yeah.
they're like, "What is it?" It feels just, like, so outside the realm of Star Wars film, like the movies that
Oh
we're used
yeah.
to seeing,
Mhm.
that I guess I could see how it'd be frustrating, but again, I'm putting what's the phrase? The horse is ahead of the wagon or something like that, because 'cause we'll be talking about the world between worlds here in a little bit, but, the episode opens with Hera rather than Ahsoka, and Hera is landing on and Ahsoka pronounced the name of this planet differently at the end of the episode. Did you catch that?
Was it Satos? Is that how she said
Yeah,
it?
she
I
said
think she
it was
said
either
Sato.
Satos or Sat I think it was Satos, yeah.
Hmm.
But I've been saying Cetos the whole time.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
don't know. So apparently it's Satos. Satos? One of the 2. Anyways, so the scene opens, Hera and Jason are on Satos, and they're sort of trying to figure out what has happened to Sabine and Ahsoka. Hera hears something, discovers Hu Yang, who is holding the helmet of Sabine. And Joey, you mentioned during the reaction, you're like, "Man, I didn't know droids could have this much emotion."
It reminds me of what was it, B2 emo in Andor?
Right.
Remember that
Yeah,
droid?
yeah,
But we could understand what Hu Yang's saying.
yeah. Alex, how do you feel about Hu Yang so far? I think Joey and I talked about him a little bit, but he's one of our, like, most surprisingly enjoyable characters of the show so far.
I was gonna say, I think it was by, like, episode 2 of the show, I remember telling one of my friends, I'm like, "I love him." I'm like, "I'm falling in love with this," I'm definitely like a 3PO, R2D2 type of person, like, those are my original droids, but I I think the added of, he's not he's droid-like, but he also like we've seen in this episode, I think it made me fall in love with him more of just having that emotion, and the timing that they've given him in a lot of the episodes, I feel like works really well to the advantage of the scene or what's happening to kind of like move the story along, which I think really
Mm.
um kind of creates that difference that, you know, in some instances the droids are put there for comedic relief, and I feel like yes, he has had those moments, but at the same time, like, especially in this, when we were watching and Joey was like, you could immediately just feel the emotion from his look, even though his face can't move, and it's just coming from his eyes or his voice. So I really love that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you said something about the comedic relief. He feels like the first droid who is so much more than just
Yeah.
comedic relief.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Like, there's certain droids that, like, obviously have importance in the story and whatnot, but Hu Yang displays emotion in ways that even droids like C-3PO can't, and I don't know, just and
Exactly.
it's funny because he's obviously not a human, but they find a way of, uh, either whether it's through humor or sadness or despair, he feels human in many ways,
Yeah.
but, Hu Yang, surprising character in the show so far. So we jump over to Ahsoka shortly after this scene, and after we learn that the name of the episode is Shadow Warrior, we see Anakin wanting to finish training with Ahsoka within the world between worlds. And perhaps the most surprising part about this scene is when Ahsoka kind of questions, like, "What training? Like, what are you talking about?" Anakin's response is basically like, "Live or die."
Yeah.
And you're like,
Hmm.
"Whoa, like, hold on,
Here,
buddy,
here
like,
we
is
go.
this" Yeah, yeah, what's about to happen here? What was your, like, gut reaction when you first, heard him say that? And maybe this time I will we'll go Joey and then Alex.
Well, I think the surprise was it seems like she had died. I mean, that's kind of what it looked like to me because he said something to the effects of, "You still have a chance then," because she responded in a certain way, and she's like, "A chance of what?" And then she said, "To live." So, that implying that she actually did die in that fight against Balin, and yeah, I thought that was I don't know, like, just to have that thought that, even just for a little bit that Ahsoka died, this just kinda blew my mind a little bit, and if that's the way and we still kind of don't know how she got brought into the world between worlds, right? Whether this is the pathway, do all the Jedi kind of go here? That was kinda what I was thinking, like, is this what
Mm,
happens when the Jedi first die? They end up here, and then go off into as to be part of the Force, as they say, after they die, is this the entryway? Is this their pearly gates, if you will? Just a lot of thought, that you have to go into it just to even be here. So now that he is saying to finish her training, you just wonder, like, well, what does that even mean? Like, how are you going to get her back? And so all this stuff. So my mind is, you asked me, what did I think? My mind was just scrambled at this point.
yeah. What about you, Alex? What were you thinking?
I think it immediately hit me when he said, to live or die. It's like, okay, well, then we kind of know what position she's in. And then it kind of starts to slowly hit you, like Joey mentioned, of like, oh, like she actually did die. Because of course you think, oh, well, she's the protagonist. Like why would she die? Why would we think she's going to have that happen? But as soon as he said finish your training, I actually got really excited because it's like, okay, great. I kind of just immediately went into the thought of, we will get to hopefully see things or there will be more interaction with them that um I think like I mentioned, things left unsaid. I was interested to see, okay, what's going to come out of this training because I feel like yes, they are in a a, a lightsaber battle or a duel, but at the same time, this is more than that. Like he's showing her more than that. Um, while being, it's a mental training is kind of how I got what I got out of it. And so that made me really excited because I felt like, okay, they're gonna show us these things and almost like little tidbits and treats that we as Star Wars fans have kind of been hoping,
Mhm.
can we finally get to see these things? So I was actually really excited. First of all, I love, Anakin. He is my absolute favorite. But and so I think it was just really like a wonderful scene to kind of grasp the audience. Obviously it gives you more questions about World Between Worlds, as Joey said. How do we get here? Is this what all Jedi go through? But yeah, it was really exciting moment.
Yeah, I think the the main thing, as you said, not an exciting moment for sure, and I was just I had confusion. I was I just was feeling those feelings of like, so if she is dead, does she have essentially what I was thinking through is like, so she has the choice to live, but if she has the choice to live, does that make her dead? Is kind of what my thought process
Right.
was. Or is this like, as Joey said, like some sort of like limbo place where Jedi go as soon as they move on from I don't know. Another thought I had in regards to who or how she got into the world between worlds. Um, Another thought that I was tossing around, and I think I may have seen this on a different channel or something on YouTube, is that it could have been like the daughter that pulled her into the world between
Mm.
worlds. And again, for
Mm.
anyone maybe who's listening to this who hasn't seen Clone Wars or Rebels, and you're like, "Whose daughter?" Um, there is a arc within the Clone Wars called the Mortis arc, where it sort of is an examination of what the Force is, and there is the daughter, the son, and the father. The father represents the balance, the son represents the darkness, and the daughter represents the light. And so Ahsoka has this little owl that follows her around, Morai, who is like the embodiment of the daughter. And so that was something I thought about. Maybe that
Mm.
was who pulled
That's a
her
good
into the
point.
world between worlds. But um, so shortly after this, looking through my notes here, Joey, do you want to take this point on the note? Because I'm like reading this writing and
Right.
I'm like not following what I
So
wrote here.
so I didn't notice this when we first watched it, but when I did a rewatch, I had the captions on, and apparently Captain Carson says to Hera that Senator Organa is covering
Oh,
for Hera is covering for Hera because Hera had taken the ships and the
Right.
squadron and everything. So apparently Senator Organa was the one that actually had been covering for her. I
I
d- I
completely missed
I
that on the watch through the
completely
first time.
I can't even believe we completely missed it the first watch through. When I
I missed
watched
it
it
on the
again,
rewatch.
yeah, when I
Yeah.
watched it again, because it's kind of like, but it's Captain Carson, so I'm like really, I'm really watching. So I watched it and I'm like, wait, did he say Senator Organa? And if I'm wrong, somebody call me out on it, but I'm pretty sure that's what he said, that Senator Organa was covering for them. So I
Right.
thought that was a cool little callback to our friend Senator Organa.
So the reason I was so confused is because in our show notes, I read it as Senator Organa, and my mind immediately went to Bail Organa, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
Isn't
Oh.
he
Yeah.
dead?
No, not
And I
not
was
that
I
Organa.
was
There's
so
another one.
confused. Okay, okay.
There's
G
another one.
Good
There
catch though. I definitely did not catch that the
Yeah.
first time. And again, it probably is a like somewhat of a joint effort between Leia and Mon Mothma. Although
Mhm.
during the transmission later in the episode, I think it's Mon Mothma who calls Hera on
Hmm.
the comm and is like, "I can't cover for you anymore," basically.
Yeah.
So basically, all that to say, Hera's support at the New Republic Senate is kind of no longer.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And you see this New Republic fleet sort of start to make their way to try to return her because she really hasn't captured any evidence or hasn't captured Morgan Elsbeth and can't really provide concrete reasoning for why the New Republic should be supporting her in this quest. And then she even has a quote at one point, and she says, "What good is a high rank if you can't use it every now and then?"
Yeah. Every
I
now
love
and then,
that.
meaning every episode of
Mhm.
Ahsoka.
Yes, yeah. Interestingly, this was, I think, something that got overlooked as one of the best parts of the episode. The next thing we're going to talk about,
Hmm.
um, and moving forward in Star Wars, this will become probably more and more interesting to discuss as to how they'll go about this character. Jason Syndulla, the son of Hera Syndulla and Kanan Jarrus, at one point hears lightsaber fighting over the ocean. And, this world between worlds, we still don't have a full grasp of kind of what exactly it is, and I'm not sure if we ever will. But in some ways, it operates or exists almost, I mean, as the name suggests, between worlds. Like, this is not the, like, tangible, like, it's not a place per se, is what I'm trying to say. And so, um, that for him to be able to, like, hear this, to interpret this almost through the Force, even though he's so young and has these untapped abilities, and you even hear Hu Yang say that, when I think it's Carson who asks, what's going on? Hu Yang says Jason has abilities. His father Kanan Jarrus was a Jedi, and then humorously Carson responds, "Okay."
That was
um,
great.
yeah, yeah. But talk a little bit as well to what you think Jason's role, maybe in Ahsoka, but perhaps even more largely within sort of the New Republic era of Star Wars will be moving forward. And especially as it pertains to his abilities, because it seems like he's pretty strong in the Force. At least it would indicate that from having watched this episode. Alex, what are your thoughts on Jason?
Yeah, I definitely get the feeling that either we're gonna see more of Jason because obviously they're giving us obviously an example of his powers already being there, his ability to sense these things, especially I think he had said in the episode, "Do you hear that?" And we are all like, "What? Do you hear what are we listening for?" And so I think it's gonna be interesting what his journey is. I'm very excited, if they definitely dive down that road, whether it's in, another series, other episodes within Ahsoka, or obviously they could play around with him as a character later in kind of any other series or lore. I'm always up for, you know, finding out more about different characters, like we've said, that may not be in the current realm yet. So I think it was great for us to just kind of delve into like, oh yeah, Jason, like you said, Jason is the father of Kate or is the son of Caden, and everyone else like, okay, what does that mean? And but hopefully it has people kind of getting into who those characters are and getting more interested, even if you don't know or didn't watch Clone Wars or Rebels. And I think I had said that maybe in my other podcasts or the other episodes that I was on, but just getting people interested in the fact that there are so many characters in this world. I mean, it's not just as my dad likes to think, episodes 4, 5, and 6. There's so many more characters that are not even touched or within, like, we've learned so many things as Disney's put out things, as books have come out. So I'm definitely very excited for the future of Jason to see where that goes, whether it's in this series or something else.
We might even see like a reverse effect at some point of people who haven't
Hmm.
seen those shows and then watch Ahsoka and they're like, "Oh, I want to know more about those characters, so I'm going to go
Exactly.
watch the shows now," which is pretty cool
Exactly.
as well.
Yes.
Joey, what did you think about Jason?
So this is the question I didn't want to answer, and you're gonna hear
Oh,
why. You're
interesting.
gonna
Why
hear
is
you're gonna
that?
hear why.
I'm curious.
So he's not around during Force Awakens,
Mm,
Mm.
and what has happened with Jedi since then? Well, I remember Luke had a school for some of the Jedis.
mm.
Oh.
Does he become one of the students?
Do you think he's a Knight of Ren or a
Does he
Kylo Ren
become
Oh,
does
victim?
he does he become right? Does he become a Knight of Ren? Does he end up not making it out of the Jedi Temple? So that's where my conspiracy theory, thoughts went when I saw that Jason is around right now.
yeah.
And that's been dwelling around in my head. Hopefully that's not what happens. Maybe he just is just this rogue Jedi for so long. I mean, his dad,
Yeah.
that's very much what his dad did for a long time. He was just kind of this Jedi or the Jedi trained. And who knows, but to go towards a less dark storyline, maybe Ahsoka takes him under her wing, at some point. Maybe it's both Sabine and him learning from Ahsoka. That's the happier ending that I'm hoping for. But it's possible that it ends that other way too, as well for him.
Did either of you think it was weird, or perhaps did it even bother you that Hera was able to hear the lightsabers?
Did she? I couldn't really tell if she was able to or not.
The way they depicted it, it very much
Hmm.
sounds like
They
once
made it
Jason
seem, yeah,
explains it to her, she's like, "Oh, I do hear it," sort of thing. Which
right,
she's not force sensitive, at least in
Hmm.
Rebels, she's definitely not.
Right.
right.
And I think as we're parents, right, Alex? Sometimes you just say that to your kids just to be like,
The amount
Maybe
of
that's what it
times
was.
I've been like, my son's like, "Did you hear that?" "Sure, yeah, I
She
did."
pats Jason on the head.
Right.
"Sure, I hear it."
Like, we'll pretend to close our eyes together and listen.
yeah. What they didn't show was her kind of peeking over at her son, like, kind of looking.
Like,
Is he done?
Yeah,
Is he done yet?
I would love to know kind of like the mindset between maybe amongst the showrunners as to whether they intended to have it seem like Hera can hear the lightsabers or not. Um,
true.
Not that it's like a big thing, but it's sort of the same thing that we talked about with Sabine before the show even started. For her to be like suddenly this like force sensitive person after not being for all of Rebels is kind of
Hmm.
like, oh, I don't know about that, you know?
Hmm.
Mhm.
So maybe it is a little bit unclear in regards to Hera, but I thought that was worth bringing up because that was something I thought about. I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So shortly after, Jason hears the lightsaber fighting, which is taking place in the world between worlds between Ahsoka and Anakin. Anakin is not only is he battling Ahsoka in this lightsaber duel. Did you feel like in some sense he's like holding back just a little bit?
Um, I don't know if there maybe a little bit here and there, but man, that fight was so awesome though. I mean,
Yeah.
just in general, I don't know if I don't know. What do you think, Alex? Did you think that he was like pulling his punches at all?
It definitely it felt a little different to me. I feel like I would have to go back and maybe watch, um, in other instances where they showed him fighting, but I can kind of see what Ben's saying, where it kind of just fell off a little bit
Mm,
based on, maybe like previous times we've seen him like holding back or holding his punches just to kind of give, I don't know why, if it was that way on purpose or to kind of give her more push to, um, to live,
mm.
that I'm not sure of. But I can definitely see your point with that, Ben, that it did feel a little off, with you mentioning that.
Or at the very least, going like slightly easier when he's Anakin as opposed to when he's Vader.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I would,
Right.
I would, I would, I would say agree with that more. Yeah.
Yeah. In part of the battle ensuing, he kind of like shatters the floor that they're standing on, which is made almost of like this ethereal light, if you will.
Mhm.
Oh,
And so Ahsoka falls, lands, and it's cloudy and hazy. And you're looking at her and you're like, looks like she shrunk a little
Yeah.
bit. And so you notice, of course, that this is a step back in time, if you will, to the Clone Wars era. And correct me if I'm wrong, other than like the Battle of Geonosis, and maybe a few things here and there in Revenge of the Sith, this is really like perhaps the best look at the true Clone Wars era of what it would have been like on the battlefield, fighting the separatists with these, I think, first generation clones in this episode. And so Anakin has this quote he says at one point as well. He says, "When Obi-Wan taught me, you're keepers of the peace, but now to win this war, I have to teach you to be a soldier." And you can see kind of the conflict within young Ahsoka, and she's basically telling him that that's not what she wants to be. Like, what if she doesn't want to fight? What if she says, "What if I want to stop fighting, Anakin?" And then, of course, his response, which is similar to his response that he gave her just a couple minutes prior, up before they fell, is
yeah.
he says, "Well, then you'll die." So, sort of this again, live or die concepts. It was interesting to me the way they approached sort of the Ahsoka transformation from the beginning to the end of this episode. I thought they were going to focus more on her, like, casting off the guilt that she had for Anakin turning to the dark side, and
Mm,
there were definitely elements of that, but I felt a lot more so it was like this desire to just live rather than like the shedding of guilt that they focused on a lot. I mean, the whole
mhm.
thing with Anakin is like you have to like keep going, like otherwise you're gonna die. And so I don't know. What did you think about this scene? I guess is all I'm really trying to ask. Um, Whoever wants to go, yeah.
Go ahead, Joey.
Okay, I'll go. I mean, I thought visually it was stunning. Part of me wanted to see a little bit more. I mean, I think one of the YouTube comments said that it was purposely hazy and
Yep.
foggy to show confusion and not
Mhm.
fully understanding, which I get. But part of me wants to be a little bit selfish and kind of see, the entire landscape of all the tanks and all the things, but whatever. So, um, but yeah, just seeing. I think this is what Alex alluded to earlier. Is just those feelings that you had the first time you had seen Clone Wars, the first time you'd seen Ahsoka and Anakin kind of be together, work together when she was much younger as his Padawan. So I think they really hit all of the notes there. And just like you were saying, Ben, the progression of Ahsoka from here, and then we'll talk a little bit about, when she's in the Siege of Mandalore and, eventually back between the world between worlds, just to have that progression and seeing how she understands, who she is, not so much of who he wanted her to be.
Right.
Yeah. Um, and I think I agree with both of your sentiments in that um I think that it was really great to see obviously these scenes come to life with stuff that we've seen in Clone Wars and seeing them in this seeing a younger Ahsoka interact with Anakin. And I kind of felt like this even, and I know we've talked about this earlier, but even as someone who maybe didn't see Clone Wars or didn't know anything about their prior relationship, I felt like you could still look at this and you could still kind of understand that there was, what their relationship was prior to everything happening. And so I thought it was still a great way for them to get that story across, obviously, even without having that background knowledge. Obviously, for us, we're like, this is amazing. But I thought that was a great way for them to still get these little scenes in there to say, okay, well, there's a big, broader story out there. We're going to give you like the shortened version of what she went through. And then I wanted to I the one thing to touch on was just the way he had mentioned, like you said, Ben, him saying that, Obi-Wan taught me about, when we were together, it was about peace and keeping this peace. And now things have kind of changed. And I have to change the way that I'm teaching you, whether you like it or not, that this is the way that things are.
Mhm.
That we're keepers of it's peace, but in like a different way is kind of how I interpreted it, is that maybe she didn't quite understand that as she in the when she was younger, and then maybe kind of helping reiterate that idea of you need to fight and like you want to fight to live. And even though you're getting frustrated with all of these inconveniences now that you're older, you still kind of have to have that fight in you. And I really enjoyed these scenes.
Yeah. There were so many small Easter eggs in these scenes too.
Hmm.
The storm, or I guess, yeah, the sorry, not the stormtroopers, the clone troopers at this point in time, had the blue streaks on their armor, which again, anyone in the comments can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I think that indicates that these are members of the 501st, which are like Anakin's personal, like the clone troopers that were with him throughout the Clone Wars. So that was pretty cool to see. We got to see a look at live action Ryloth, which there's a big portion of the animated shows that focus on Ryloth, the homeworld of the Twi'lek species, like what Hera is, and many other characters within the Star Wars universe. And anyways, all that to say, so those were cool additions. And another one, which was pretty neat to see, was that they focused on the Siege of Mandalore battle, and this actually takes place after sort of Anakin's turn to the dark side. And so that's why at the beginning of, or when young Ahsoka and Anakin are looking at the battle, um, during this like flashback phase of the episode, Anakin says he doesn't remember this fight, and Ahsoka almost sheepishly is like, "Yeah, I know, like you weren't here," or something to that effect.
Right.
Mhm.
I don't remember what the exact quote was. But so during the Siege of Mandalore battle, we also get to see um, I think they're called, and this isn't the official Star Wars name. This is, I think, a fan given name. They're called the Mauldalorians. Have either of you ever heard that?
Oh, I don't think I have. That's funny.
I have not.
The members, once Darth Maul took over Death Watch in the Clone Wars series, and then the Death Watch members had like the
Little
horns.
horns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we
Oh.
got to see a couple of those that Ahsoka
Mhm.
takes on, and even at this point in the episode, she no longer has the green lightsaber. She has the double blades, and in terms of being a swordsman, she is much more skilled and accomplished during this scene. And then shortly thereafter, if you're watching the video podcast, you sort of see this conversation that both Anakin and Ahsoka are having as they're at the aftermath of the siege of Mandalore. And it's at this point that Anakin starts kind of speaking to her again, and slowly his eyes begin to turn Sith red. What were your immediate thoughts when you saw that? Alex, what about you? What did you think of
Um,
Anakin's eyes?
I think I was a little worried, like, okay, where are they taking this? Where is this going? Or, what obviously going into knowing that this is going through their past and also going through maybe feelings that she needed to work through. So I kind of saw it as maybe this is their way to of her working through this idea of, could I have done anything differently? Could I have helped him in some way from preventing this? And or kind of taking out her rage on the fact that he did turn to the dark side. And I kind of took that was my first thought is just maybe this is her way of just fighting her, not necessarily fighting, but like letting her emotions out and like being able to attack him in that manner while he's Vader to be like,
Mm.
I'm getting all this rage out, like how you would see someone like pounding fists, but not like in a cruel manner, but just kind of getting that emotion out and working through it. So yeah, that's kind of my initial thoughts.
Hmm. And actually, if you're watching the video version, you see the image of Anakin igniting. I think this is the first time we've ever seen this in live action or animated. Um, his hilt, but with the red lightsaber.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
specifically the Anakin saber, but it's the Vader, or it's the Anakin hilt, I should say, but it's the red colored saber, which I don't know. Again, this was kind of surprising to see because we've never seen him, at least in non Darth Vader form, with the red saber. Joey, what about you? What were your thoughts on this scene after the little discussion Anakin
When
and Ahsoka
when
had?
his eyes went red, I was like, "Oh, it's on. Let's go. Let's see
Let's
where
do
this
it.
is gonna end up." I mean, we've said time and time again, lightsabers, that's what Star Wars is all about. So to see another fight, probably the last time we'll see these two fight against each other. We've seen it in Rebels, when he was as Vader, but to see it here as part of her, final bit of training, as he said, I think it's only fitting. I forget. I think maybe Alex mentioned closure. The closure that she needed in order to kind of move away from any thoughts of whether it's guilt or kind of just leaving things left unsaid and undone. We're able to finally get to this point. So to end it with a lightsaber battle just kind of seems appropriate to me in the Star Wars world.
Yeah, and shortly thereafter, at the end of the battle, well, I guess before the end of the battle, did either of you get the sense? Because it crossed my mind when we were watching it together last night. Did Ahsoka's eyes begin to turn red as well at any point, or was that just because she was
Think
staring at a
so.
red lightsaber?
I couldn't quite tell, but I got that same because they kind of got a very big, like a close up onto her eyes, and so you couldn't tell if it was from the lightsaber or if it meant that maybe she
Hmm.
had a little bit of like, ooh, she has a little bit of darkness in her as well. Or yeah, it was interesting because they decided to like the way that the image was, it was close up on her eyes.
Hmm. I think it
Yeah.
was very much on purpose that to give us that little bit like, oh, because I think even when we watched it, we're like, oh, wait a minute, I think I see something we haven't seen before. We haven't seen a dark Ahsoka ever before.
Mm,
So, but maybe that it was just I'm sure that was done on purpose to raise a couple of eyebrows, but at the end of
oh
it, it
yeah.
was just a reflection.
Yeah, and at the end of this battle, Ahsoka disarms Anakin and has the opportunity to strike him down. And actually, I felt like I was almost it felt like a parallel to Anakin and Dooku in many ways because she's holding the saber at
Hmm.
his
Oh
neck
yeah.
sort of and has the opportunity to do it. And rather than do so, she kind of just throws it over the edge and perhaps one of the best lines of the episode, she says, "I choose to live." And then Anakin's eyes slowly start to subside from the yellow Sith color, and which also alludes to the fact that Anakin, in many ways, like he brought balance to the Force because he is the balance in the Force. Like
Hmm.
Mm,
there's so much like good and evil, frankly, that like occupied him sort of simultaneously throughout many parts of his life. And so, he is the chosen one not only because he brought balance to the Force, but because he kind of exemplifies what balance is. And that was another great thing that I thought this
Right.
scene did in depicting it in that manner. Um, and also, like, I don't know what it was, but just looking at Hayden throughout this entire scene, I was
Yeah.
like, especially like after the Sith eyes go away, he's like, he just looks like so happy, you know.
Right.
And again, as a byproduct of that, you see Ahsoka's demeanor like very changed for the rest of the episode. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
something
That's a
that
good call.
I think Alex, if I'm not mistaken, at some point for the end of today's podcast, you might talk
Yes.
about sort of in something you're going to talk about, but
Yes.
so we'll leave that on the table for now, and we'll continue with the episode. As Ahsoka wakes up from the world between worlds, the water sort of like slowly rising above her head, and she emerges from the water on Satos and is pulled up by a squadron. Uh, I in my head, I was like, how did she survive that long being in the water there? But I guess no.
Well, she chose to live, Ben. So I mean, that's what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're
That's
right. Yeah, I can't argue with that.
You can't
Again, this
choose to live and then die right in the middle of the water. That'd
Right.
be the worst ending of Ahsoka right there.
right. Yeah, and again, this is like one of the things that bothers me about sometimes with Star Wars thinking, like people who are critical of it, and I'm doing it right now, so I'm like kind of a hypocrite, is that like they think like way too um I don't want to say critically because I think it's important to think critically, but like sometimes like the point is for you to not understand it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like the force in many ways is not meant to be something that is just like concrete and understandable. It's
And well
very
defined.
right, it's very
Right.
mystical in many ways, and so the fact that she was underwater, but, like, operating within the world between worlds, um, I don't see that as something that's, like, hard to come to terms with per se. I just thought I'd throw that out there in case anyone else had the same thought as me. And then, of course, Ahsoka meets with Hera and Jason, where the map was destroyed back at the little, I don't know what you would call that centerpiece almost,
Mm.
that location of, jagged rocks, and then she uses and I forget the name of the force ability. I wanna say it's, psychometry? Does that sound
Mm.
right?
Sure.
Sure.
Let's go with that.
She senses what happens and, finds out that Sabine has left with Balin and Shin and Morgan Elsbeth on the way to Thrawn and Ezra, and so and you see almost this, like, renewed sense of confidence within her. Like,
Mhm.
this is the time where they should be the most hopeless, but it definitely seems like the most hopeful version of Ahsoka that we've seen, in the show so far. Almost like she has just this, like, smirk about her with most of what she says, but not in a snarky way, like,
Hmm.
Right.
in a peaceful way more so. And so Captain Carson and the new is kind of assigned the responsibility by Hera to not let the New Republic fleet to come through and and interrupt the mission that Ahsoka and Hu Yang are going on, which of course is with as we noted in the reaction yesterday, the Purgles is the solution to how they're going to make their way to finding Ezra and Thrawn and Sabine and the rest as well. And so Mon Mothma tells Hera, and this is kind of what we alluded to earlier in the podcast, but that she must return to Coruscant and potentially be stripped of her rank of general. Ahsoka then, meanwhile, goes up to the Purgle, and she uses that same. You know what this part reminded me of?
Mm.
I know Joey, you've seen this because we saw it together. Alex, have you seen the very first Tales of the Jedi episode with Ahsoka,
Yes.
the one where she's like a
With
baby?
the saber, or it was like a saber tooth or something,
Yes.
and she goes and yes,
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, that's what this scene with the Purrgil, she
Yep.
climbs out of the ship with Hu Yang and, so that she can meet the Purrgil, I wouldn't say face to face, but the Purrgil's face is a whole lot bigger than her face.
Yeah.
But you get my drift. She kind of like, reaches out her hand and I immediately thought of that scene from Tales of the
Yes.
Jedi. I was like, "Oh, that's
So
cool,"
true.
I forgot
Her
about that. Nice one.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Um, and then, and then meanwhile, I don't remember if we talked about this as we were watching the episode or not, but I was definitely thinking like, how are they gonna get the ship to go with the Purrgil?
Right.
And of course, the solution is, well, let's fly the ship into the Purrgil's mouth. which hey, if that works. What did you
Right.
think about this scene with all the Purrgil? I mean, it was great seeing them in live action, but especially this many of them in live action.
I thought
Joey,
it
what
was
were your
great.
or
Oh,
yeah,
go
Alex,
ahead.
go for it, go for it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I thought
No,
it
no, no,
was
go for it.
great.
All you.
I was hoping they would show us more of the Purgles because they showed a little bit of them in episode 4 as she looks up and she sees them kind of in the clouds. And so it was really almost majestic. I feel like it really went well with what and like you mentioned, I have a little piece later that I want to talk about, but I felt like it just really went well with the transformation after she came out of the world between worlds and just kind of this renewed sense of confidence. And like somehow the Purgles make me feel like that signified that in a way,
Mm,
if that makes sense. Just
mhm.
kind of like flying up in the air with these Purgles just kind of majestically floating next to you. It just feels kind of cool.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with that totally. Joey, did you have any thoughts on the Purrgils?
It was so like you all said already. It's so cool to see them in live action. And I remember when we had watched Rebels, for one of our episodes, we had watched the last season of Rebels, and obviously the Purgles were a part of that. To to think that they were going to actually show up here, I don't think I really thought that was going to be a thing up until they kept showing up during the series, and you're like, all right, here we go. And to have and we mentioned like the massiveness of how big these are, and then Ahsoka picks like the hugest one, Big Mama Purgle, that to jump in their mouth and fly off to another galaxy. So it was just, and Alex, the way you're even explaining all this now, I'm like, wow, I didn't even think of it like that. So this is one of my favorite things
There
about
you
Star Wars
go.
fandom is that you talk to enough people, you're like, wow, I did not even think of that.
Hmm.
Yeah, the whole segment with the Purrgil was just I don't know. It was cool to see them come to life in live action and depicted through the way they did. And so of course, Ahsoka, as we mentioned, she reaches out, she has the Purrgil open its mouth. Hu Yang flies the ship into the Purrgil, and I think it's after they're actually in the Purrgil's mouth. Uh, I think it's after where Hu Yang asks her um, something to the effect of like where are we going or something like that, and or do you know where we're going? And Ahsoka's like, no.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Hu Yang just has this moment where he's like, it was the way they did it. He didn't even say anything, but it was almost this look of disbelief on
Right.
his robotic face. And so I thought that was pretty funny and worth noting as well. But Ahsoka also makes the promise to Hera that she'll find Ezra and Sabine, and then a cool note here from Hera is that he says, "May the Force be with you," as
Oh, yeah.
Ahsoka is getting ready to head off there with Hu Yang.
Yeah, and I,
So
and I mentioned that's a bit of a Empire Strikes Back callback
yes,
when Han had been taken away by Boba Fett, and I think Lando actually tells Leia, we'll find Han. I'm sorry, we'll find Han. I promise.
Yeah.
And then
ooh, calling him Han instead of Han,
yeah,
Joey.
I listen. I corrected it. I got it right. But then Luke is the one that actually says, "May the Force be with you." But same kind of callback. It had that same type of beat that
Mhm.
reminded me kind of my Spidey sense went off in my ears when I heard that.
I know
Yeah.
that. I know that.
Yeah.
So this is where the episode ends, and there's actually like a pretty long pause after they jump to light speed, and I think the three of us were all like, "Are we? Is that it?" Like
I
we
know.
thought, like maybe we get like a little taste of Sabine and Ezra and Thrawn or something at the end of the
I
episode,
know.
but
hmm
no Balin, no Shin, no Morgan, no Sabine, no Ezra, no Thrawn in this episode. So
I
my
was hoping
only
I was hoping the Purgle was going to like actually pass them in traffic.
I
Like
yeah
I thought that
that'd
too.
been great. They just like kind of drove
yeah
by and they're like,
Go
"Hey, it's
by.
Sabine. We'll see you
yeah
over there."
yeah. The other thing that we noted during the live reaction was that we're like, how do they know where to stop? And then Joey, I think it was you that said, it's just like a little bus where you press the button when you need to get
Yeah.
off. Yeah, but that is interesting to note how they'll, maybe the Purga will just go to the same place it went to the first time with
Well,
Ezra.
just like Ahsoka said, it's Anywhere is better than nowhere, right?
Yep, yep. It's a great quote. Yep. And I guess we'll truly find out in 5 days where is somewhere. So well, and then that kind of concludes the episode. So now that we've walked our way through it, I think we'll each talk about perhaps our favorite moment from the episode, and as well give our grading of the episode. We gave our initial gradings yesterday, and then we'll give our final gradings before we sign off today. So, just to start us off, Alex, do you want to go first and talk about maybe your favorite moment of the episode? Something that we alluded to, I think once or twice already in this recording.
Yeah. So I think I've mentioned a couple of times it was interesting, I think, for me to see her kind of emerge from the world between worlds. And I think it's after she kind of wakes up and talks to Hu Yang and asks him, what's going on. But something I guess I noticed was just the way that she was dressed. She is in most of the episodes dressed in a darker garb of clothes or more muted tones. And I noticed as the episode went on after that, as she's gaining confidence and using her memory to kind of recall what's happening and feeling more confident of like we're gonna go up to the Purgle and we're gonna figure out how to get Sabine back. Like her clothes just kept getting lighter and like almost like I think of someone kind of releasing all of this tension. Like now that she knows kind of what she went through in the moments with Anakin, I felt like you kind of see this new, almost like free Ahsoka. Not, I feel like maybe that she was trapped. Like we've
Mhm.
kind of seen her maybe trapped, like in her own mind about certain things and feeling unsure of, do I want to, um, bring on Sabine? Going through those type of questions. So I just that was one of my favorite things. It almost felt like I mentioned with the Purgles and you're like up in the air and it's almost just like a majestic kind of floaty feeling. I don't know. I just kind of got that sense of them bringing in this like brightness to the end of the episode before we go inside the Purgle of just kind of giving us a freedom effect that she had kind of she decided to live.
Mhm.
That's like the best way I can describe it. So I really like I really thought that was a nice subtle touch that I noticed.
Are either of you by chance Lord of the Rings fans?
Mhm.
I am, yes.
So that's what I thought of in with this
Oh,
particular, like, it
I
felt
could see that.
very Gandalf-esque, like,
right,
Yes.
right, yeah.
being resurrected and then,
Right.
like, you've thrown off the gray,
Mhm.
neutral garb and are now wearing this, like, bright white garment,
Love
so,
that. Yeah.
um, yeah, I
Agreed.
as you said, yeah, definitely not an accident in terms of
No.
the choosing of the wardrobe for the end of the episode for the
Mhm.
Ahsoka. Joey, what about you? What was your favorite moment from the episode?
I really liked the use of Darth Vader, dark side Anakin in this episode. I mean, it's something you just haven't seen in so long, and to finally see it again, kind of in a new way. I mean, I guess we did see it in Kenobi, but um, just with Ahsoka, we've never really seen these two go at it in live action. So to be able to experience it finally was really cool experience. I mean, we know that she had fought as him as Vader in Rebels, but to see it again, any lightsaber battle is great. To see it in this perspective in this way, it was just super cool. And I was just so happy when it was going on, even though I wasn't quite sure exactly what was going on at the moment when I was watching it. But to see it all happen here was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would agree. I would also pose a question to both of you in regard to this as well, and it's something I asked you yesterday actually, and I would be curious to see if your thoughts have changed because mine have, but I would be surprised if both either of yours have. Simply, is this Anakin? I think I asked you both that
Hmm.
before the episode yesterday, and I think you both said yes, and I was like, "Oh, I'll take the no side."
Yeah, yeah.
I would actually, having now seen the episode, feel like it actually is
Hmm.
Anakin's Force ghost.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Uh,
Agreed.
I mean, have either of your thoughts shifted on that, or pretty much where you were at yesterday?
I think I would still like I would agree with what my sentiments were yesterday that it was Anakin, and I think like you touched on Ben earlier, where it's a great example of them showing that he was the balance. We do
Hmm.
when you have Anakin, you do have the light and the dark, and you want they. It was great that they showed that. Um, that even though I'm thinking back to like episode uh let me see, 6, where they show I think they had edited it once they had done the prequel episodes, and they added Anakin's Force Ghost, and they took out
Right.
the older
Yeah,
actor,
yeah.
and people were just up in arms about, like, "Well, why are we seeing him when he was younger? Like, what is" and George looks like, "Well, first of all, I make the rules." But I think that kind of harkens back to when he was talking about it then. We're seeing someone who, like, that was him kind of balancing those forces, and that was how he will kind of be remembered. And so I think that was kind of a great way to explain that even though he's in this world between worlds, he still kind of has, you know, a little bit of both there.
Hmm.
You think that actor who they edited out gets residuals from Return of the Jedi
That's
still?
a great question.
That's a
I
good
don't
question,
know.
actually.
I don't know.
Someone out there look it up and let us know. Um, my favorite moment from the episode was definitely I would just broadly say the Clone Wars flashback as a whole. And if I had to focus on any specific portion of the flashback, it would probably be young Ahsoka. And I hope I'm not mispronouncing her name, but Ariana Greenblatt was like something that I didn't even know
Hmm.
I didn't even know she was going to be in this show or in the episode. I didn't know she was going to be portraying Ahsoka. I didn't even know we were going to see young Ahsoka in this show.
Right.
So to experience the Clone Wars in live action in a way that felt like genuinely some of my favorite Star Wars, um, not just like since the Disney acquisition, but like for those like 10 or 15 minutes, maybe like some of my favorite Star Wars ever. It just felt really special to me, and
Really.
not simply for the nostalgic effect. I mean, that was definitely there. And it was a large reason why I loved it, if I'm being completely honest. But more
Nice.
so for like the like the character development of Ahsoka, who is admittedly also my favorite character. To see her as we've talked about for this whole podcast, kind of have to struggle with these thoughts of life and death and what it means to be a shadow warrior, if you will, and just everything about it, the callbacks, the nostalgia,
Yeah.
the development of Ahsoka, and just I loved it. I loved it a lot. So that was my favorite part of the episode personally. So at this point, I think we're ready for some episode grading.
Hmm.
Um, I'll keep my score that I gave yesterday and stick with it.
Yeah.
I'm way too biased, so I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
totally understand if there's people out there who are like, I liked it, but it wasn't quite a 10. I
Hmm.
hear you.
Yeah.
I'm still giving it a 10.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
I just everything about it, and I've rambled too much already, but um it is my favorite character in Star Wars. It not only did her justice, but went above and beyond and also gave us Anakin in the process of doing so. And so
Yep.
just all of that together, I loved the episode. My favorite episode of the show so far, personally.
Hmm.
What about you two? Joey, you want to go first?
Yeah. I mean, I think yesterday I said it was a 9. I'll give it a. I'll bump it up 9.5 to out of 10.
Yes.
I still liked I still liked the last episode a little bit more.
Mhm.
That's kind of how because I gave that one a 10. So I still like that one just a tad bit more. Um, but not to say that I mean this was an incredible episode. I was smiling ear to ear the entire time, and yeah, it shows a lot about what Dave Filoni understands what needs to be in these types of shows. So 9.5, solid 9.5, and I'm hoping that the rest of the series ends up this way as well.
I think there's a
Yeah.
chance it could. What about you, Alex?
I was gonna say I bumped mine up to 9.5. I know I said 9 yesterday.
Yeah.
But I I think Hayden really elevated this
Hmm.
episode for me. Anything that he's in is always great because it's more that we get to see of Anakin and understanding his story. And then, like you
Mm,
mentioned, getting to really see not just current day Ahsoka, but just getting that background that we were kind of waiting for just felt so refreshing to finally see and like, oh yes, we finally get to see this part that we've been wanting to see happen. So I would say my hope was to see something with Thrawn or like a little tidbit at the end would have been great. I think that would have bumped it up to a 10 for me. Like, oh,
mm.
give me everything. But yeah, it was a great episode.
Yeah. Yeah, like we mentioned, that was kind of the one thing that this episode didn't have that the previous one did. It didn't have, like, that shocking thing that happened
Right.
at the end to hold you to the next episode where you were like, "Oh, no way, that's what" like it
Right.
did with Anakin from episode 4 to episode 5, but anyways, yeah, hey, both of you elevated your scores,
That's
that's
right.
all I'm saying. Well, we've had a blast today breaking down Ahsoka episode 5. We will be breaking down the 6th episode of Ahsoka during next week's podcast. And the day prior to that, we'll also be releasing our reaction to the 6th episode as well. And a very special announcement is that next week will be the 50th episode of Hoth Hangout Podcast and the 1 year anniversary, which we are very, very excited about. Um, First of all, we want to say thank you to each and every single one of you who has ever listened or watched the Hoth Hangout podcast. It's a joy to be able to talk about something that we love so much and something that we hold dear and is a very special part of our lives. And not only that, but share it with others who are like minded and have those similar interests. And so it's been a blast. Here's to 1 year, and here's to many more. So join us on next week's podcast where we'll be perhaps answering some questions from anyone out there. If you have thoughts on Star Wars, doesn't even have to be a question. It can be just something you noticed in an episode, or we would love and encourage you to send us your thoughts or questions to hothangout@gmail.com. Or if you have Twitter, you can tweet at us there, or X now, I guess we should still be calling it. Send us something over on that platform as well. We'll be looking their Instagram DMs, whatever you got, we'll be looking for them here in the next week and hopefully talking about them on next week's show. Additionally, we also wanted to mention, and Joey, I think you had that special other announcement
Yeah,
you wanted to talk about.
quick thing. We haven't announced specifically what we're doing for it yet, but we still do have this box of Star Wars flagship that we're going to be giving away as part of our 1 year anniversary. So be on the lookout for information on that.
Yes, I would think in all likelihood we'll have some sort of um, announcement, perhaps either on socials or during
Hmm.
next week's podcast episode, with details regarding the winner or how to win that box that you just saw Joey
That's right.
talk about there. So, yeah, 1 year podcast anniversary coming next week. We also want to say a big special thank you to Alex for joining us this week. It's been a pleasure to have you on, and it's just been
Thank you.
awesome to not only discuss and break down the episode, but react yesterday, and it's been a pleasure. Again, this is really my today and yesterday my first time getting to
I
like
know.
meet and talk with you about Star Wars, and so I would also just say, if you ever want to talk about Star Wars, um, Joey and I always love doing that, whether it's on a podcast or just because we love Star Wars outside of a podcast. So, um, thank you for being here, Alex, and we
Definitely.
also wanted to give you the chance to, if you want to let the listeners know
Yep.
where they might find you on socials or whatnot.
Well, thank you so much. It's been every time I've been on this podcast, Joey's been wonderful, and Ben, you've been wonderful. So thank you so much for giving me that opportunity to be here and talk about Star Wars. But you can find me on Twitch. I stream Monday through Thursdays. Right now, we're playing through Starfield for the whole month of September. So if you want to watch me do that and kill myself over and over again in Starfield, then feel free. You can also find me on Twitter, X, and Instagram at Miss_Alex_games.
Awesome. And again, we'll have those social links available down in the show notes, as well as the episode we talked about at the beginning of this podcast that Alex was on a few months ago now, episode
Yeah.
29 of the Hoth Hangout podcast. So,
39. 30.
39, excuse me. Thank you, thank you. But yeah, we'll have those links available. Definitely, as you heard Alex say, those socials. Check out the socials, um, and tune in next time she's playing Starfield. I actually haven't seen any Starfield gameplay yet, so I'll have to stop
Oh,
by next time you're
I've got
playing.
some fun clips. Joey can share them with you. It's
That's
been
true.
great. It's a lot of fun.
Cool, nice, nice. Well, Alex, thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank
It
you.
was a treat and a blast breaking down episode 5 with you.
Of course. Thank you.
And join us again next week where we'll be doing our reaction to episode 6, as well as the following day on Thursday morning, every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, where we break down the episode that we watched the previous day. And again, that is going to be the special 1 year anniversary episode. Thank you so much for listening. We want to remind you that you can subscribe to the Hoth Hangout podcast channel on YouTube. And again, to all the new listeners, we want to say a very special welcome. We have about 75 more of you for this podcast than we did just a week ago before the last podcast. So, welcome to, especially to all the new subscribers. And if you're not subscribed, consider doing so. You can also listen to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify and Apple and anywhere else you can get your podcasts. And leave a 5-star review on the Hoth Hangout podcast. We would very much appreciate that. And leave us a comment as well and give us your feedback on what your thoughts are on the podcast itself. Check us out on the socials. That includes TikTok, Instagram, and X at Hoth Hangout on each of those. A reminder, you can DM us on Instagram or tweet at us on X. Any questions or thoughts you might have regarding the latest Ahsoka news or just more broadly Star Wars in general, you can also give us that info at hothhangout@gmail.com. Feel welcome to send stuff our way on the email as well. And lastly, we want to give a big special shout out to Gibbo for producing all the show assets, the videos, everything behind the scenes. This neat looking snow, if you're watching the video version of the podcast, everything that goes into making the podcast look good. That's all Gibbo. We want to, as always, say thank you, Gibbo, for everything that you do and for having the smoothest producer voice of any podcast out there.
It's true.
By the way, I had someone ask me who in my personal life who listens to the show the other day. They asked me, "What does Gibbo sound like?" And this is someone who started listening after the trivia episode.
Okay.
So I directed them. I said, "Go back and watch the trivia episode," because for those that don't
Voice
know,
reveal.
yeah, Gibbo was the moderator for our trivia that Julia and I did. But again, thank you to Gibbo. As always, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for everything you do that makes this podcast happen. Shout out to George Lucas. Shout out to Dave Filoni. Shout out to Sky Guy and Snips. This has been a great episode. Thank you again to Alex for coming on and talking some Star Wars with us. We appreciate you. Thank you to all the listeners. We love and appreciate y'all very much. As we mentioned, we'll be back again next week for our Ahsoka episode 6 reaction on Wednesday morning and the Ahsoka episode 6 breakdown on Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, which is also the 1-year anniversary of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Any last thoughts, Alex or Joey?
I'm excited for episode 6. Let's do it. I can't wait.
Do
it. Joey, what do you think?
Great time to be a Star Wars fan.
Yes.
I keep saying it every time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. It's a truly special time to be a Star Wars fan, and we're all grateful to be part of this awesome Star Wars fandom. Thank you all for listening. As always, we appreciate you, and may the Force be with you.